Well, hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the hottest news, I think, for any Forest fan at the moment. It's the links to potential breaches of FFP and the headlines that have been hitting social media and making Forest fans a little bit nervous recently. And I thought there's no better person to talk to, and I'm very grateful that he's given his time to talk to us. It's Kieran Maguire from the Price of Football podcast and the book as well. Great book. I've got it. I'd recommend reading it. Kieran, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for giving your time. We're going to be picking your brains a little bit today. It's something that you are an expert in. So could you just give us a little bit about your background before we talk more about this?
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm just a teacher. I teach at the University of Liverpool. I teach on the Football Industries MBA. I also teach for the League Managers Association, the Professional Footballers Association. I do bits and pieces for FIFA and UEFA and other, which makes me sound a lot grander than I am, because at the end of the day, I'm just a football fan with a big calculator. But my background, a long time ago, I qualified as an accountant. I was rubbish at it, hated it. Always wanted to be a teacher, so I've been teaching finance and accounting at various places since the 80s. So this is what, 80s, 90s. Too many decades of teaching. And for the last sort of 10 to 15 years, I've been really focusing on football as a financial topic, because I'm a football fan, and all my teaching career has been in Manchester and Liverpool. So any opportunity to talk to students and try to engage them in interest, they go, well, I'm not interested in this. I don't care about Mercedes-Benz. I don't care about Marks and Spencers. What about this about Manchester United? Have you seen this? And they go, oh. So I've used football as a Trojan horse to try to explain traditional financial issues. And on the back of that, I've sort of grown a portfolio. There wasn't a book on football finance. My students were moaning about it, so I wrote The Price of Football a few years ago, and that sold quite well. The Price of Football, that I do with comedian Kevin Day, is a podcast. Is bafflingly popular. Neither of us have got any idea why anybody listens to it, but we get 60,000 downloads a week, and we're grateful for that, and we're held to account by an audience. So I can add up. I don't know anything about football itself, because I've been fortunate enough to teach football managers, and you spend a lunchtime with them listening to them talk, and you realize everything that we think we know about football as fans is absolute garbage. They are the experts, and their knowledge of technical, physical, psychological issues within the game is light years ahead of what we hear on television and the radio and so on.
Well, yeah, it's a really fascinating story that I've followed for a while, and as I say, I've got your book. I think it's brilliant. It's something that I read before bed every night, which is nice to try and learn more myself about football finance, because I do think it is something that not only as a journalist but also as a fan, as you say, that I'd quite like to know more about. Because when conversations arise like the one involving Forest's FFP situation, and not just Forest but all Premier League clubs as well, I kind of want to give myself a bit of a head start so I can understand, what do these headlines really mean. So probably best to start with the Premier League's position, if you won't mind.
Sure, right. Under the present rules of the Premier League, a club is allowed to lose a maximum of £15 million over a rolling 3-year period. So you get assessed every year. On top of that, during that 3 years, for every year you've been in the Premier League, you can lose a further 30 million. If the money has come from the owner in the form of shares. And if during that 3-year period you've been in the Championship, you can lose 8 million. So in the case of Nottingham Forest, their most recent financial year was the year ended the 30th of June 2023. So therefore they would have had 1 year in the Premier League and 2 years in the Championship. So this will allow them to lose 15 million plus one amount of 30 plus two amounts of 8, which means that they're allowed to lose £61 million and not be in breach of the rules. As the losses that we look at for FFP purposes are not the same as those that we see in the accounts. And therefore, in the case of Forest, when Forest got promoted, they had specific costs in relation to the promotion. The players, the staff, management, all on bonuses. Those are ignored. The costs of upgrading the City ground so they're making sure it's the floodlights are HD compliant, that you've got enough spaces for foreign journalists to rock up. You've now got and if you take a look at the rules are ridiculous. You've got to have a minimum amount of space in the car park for Sky or TNT to be able to go and park their wagons. All of this stuff, which we don't care about that as fans. All we care about is who are we going to be signing, who are we keeping, are we going to have more money and so on. So Forest will have been allowed money for that. And if you take a look at the Forest accounts, I think they said around about 21 million pounds was the cost of promotion. If you spend money on infrastructure, we ignore that. And that's good, because you want better facilities for players, you want better facilities for fans, fantastic. If you've got an academy, and Forest Academy was upgraded in, 21-22 from Class 2 to Class 1, well, the cost of running your academy, excluded for FFP purposes. If you've got a women's team, that's excluded, because they want Premier League want clubs to invest in the women's side of the game. If you've got a community scheme, and all the Premier League clubs do, Premier League community schemes are absolutely brilliant. They turn kids around who are in danger of dropping out of society and going down the wrong route. I'm in my 60s. They deal with blokes of my age who we've got problems. Bits of us don't work the way that they used to work. We're not getting enough exercise. So walking, football, trying to get blokes to talk about their health. Football clubs are brilliant about that, because we all love football. So it starts a conversation. So all of those costs are excluded. And you're allowed to lose this, in the case of Forest, £61 million, if the owners put the money in. Yes, Mr. Marakakis has put the money in. So that's where we are in terms of Forest. We then come to what I can only describe as the rumour mill. Now, Jay, I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups. You're in a lot of WhatsApp groups. Some of them are with your mates, some of them with colleagues from work, some of them are, you can't even remember how you got into them. I've ended up in some of them with journalists, people at football clubs, and so on. And the stuff that goes on in those WhatsApp groups is stuff that we cannot say on this show, I cannot say on my show, I cannot put out on Twitter and so on. But we've got fantastic, and they're probably full of absolute nonsense. One of the stories I've got about a former manager of a club in the East Midlands, the reasons behind his sack, why he was sacked. Oh my God, what a story. But can't say it. Now, when it comes to football finance, I'm also in receipt of some of those rumours and stories. And if I'm honest, for the last couple of months, there's been a story circulating: the Premier League is going to have a go at somebody else. And there have been 3 clubs that have been mentioned most frequently. And those 3 clubs are Everton, who are going to get a second set of charges; Chelsea, Todd Bowley spending £1 billion in no time; and Forest. So that's where we were. And then yesterday, we're recording this on Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday. I've got no idea what day of the week it is. I suspect, like the rest of the country, we're completely befuddled. So yesterday, I got a call from Martin Ziegler at the time. Martin's what you call a good old school journalist. Some people are just there for clicks. He's not. He tends. And he said, any issues in respect of FFP? And I'm going, well, it's nothing concrete, because the Premier League's not had a chance to look at the accounts in depth yet, but they will have just received them. And we had a bit of a conversation, and he says, well, if there were any clubs that you'd be concerned about, who would be top of your list? And I said, well, if I'm honest, I think Everton, I'm not entirely confident about, but they sold Anthony Gordon. I think they got out of that one. In the case of Chelsea, COVID issues, Abramovich issues, Chelsea are actually very good at selling players, former academy players. I think they'll probably be okay. Forest are pretty close to the limit, because when Forest went up, I did my sums, and they were just on the right side of the line, and that's all you have to be. It's a bit like when you're driving a car. If you're driving a car at 69 miles an hour on the motorway, you're just 1 mile an hour limit below the limit. That's fine. And he clearly had been, he clearly had a feeling about Forest as well. And of course, John Percy of the Telegraph independently has been putting out something as well. So these are senior journalists. These are journalists that don't tend to do things just to get a few clicks and a bit of controversy, unlike some others who we won't mention. So what are the potential issues with regards to Forest? There's no doubt the club invested heavily when it was promoted, but we've seen other clubs do that. When Fulham went up a few years ago, they spent an absolute fortune on new players. Forest have spent a lot of money. How big is the wage bill? We don't know. If anybody believes what they see on Transfer Market with regards to fees and wages, and there's a website which lists out every football player's wages, don't. It's all fiction. And even the guys at Transfer Market themselves say our estimates are basically what it's the basis of an algorithm based on what young people are saying, based on what they see on Football Manager. So it's stuff that you have to be very, very cautious about. So I said, yeah, I think Forest were very close to the limit when they came up. Could they therefore be in trouble? Possibly. But there are so many unknowns that I don't think you can say with any degree of certainty what the position is. Then we come to the world of football politics, and you're a journalist. I'm somebody. I am a teacher, but I've sort of started to get to know quite a few people in football, and you find out that football is very political. There's an awful lot of leaking and strategic leaking taking place. So at present, the Premier League is desperate to have the legislation in respect of the independent regulator ideally scrapped, which I don't think is likely, but if not, certainly diluted and emasculated so that it's not an issue. And in order to do that, the Premier League wants to be seen to be wearing big boy trousers in the form of, well, we're taking on Manchester City, we've taken on Everton, we might be taking on another club. So has there been a leak? I've not had, look, I'll be honest, nobody's leaked anything to me direct. But they wouldn't anyway, because I'm not a journalist, and I've got the benefit of being quite independent. So, but are Forest in a position where they've got to box clever? Absolutely. So that's my understanding of the position at present. Have they overstepped the limits? I've got absolutely no idea, because I don't know what the wage bill was. I don't know what the other operating costs are. We don't know how much they've been spending on players. We don't know the amortization costs, and we don't know issues in terms of player sales. There is a separate issue in terms of Brennan Johnson. I thought he'd actually been sold earlier in the summer. I'll be honest, when I was first looking at the numbers, but clearly he was sold on the 1st of September. Could that be backdated to the 30th of June? I think it's unlikely, but unlikely is not impossible. Now, if you backdate that sale to the 30th of June, we've not got a problem whatsoever. If they can't do that, then it's going to involve accountants going through things line by line, saying you can't claim that, you can claim that. And this is what we saw in the case of Everton. Everton said, We think our FFP loss initially was around about 17 million below the limit. The Premier League says, well, we think it's 20 million above. And then they went through this very, very long process. So to summarise, the current position is Forest have had to submit their accounts by the 31st of December relating to 22-23. They didn't have a lot of wiggle room. There are some clubs where the Premier League will say, yeah, you've been making profits the last couple of years. We just take it through on the nod. Clubs like Forest, the chances are they're going to be reviewing with a little bit more precision, with a little bit more care and attention. That's not the same that they're going to be subject to charges. That's not the same that they're going to be put up in front of a commission, and that's not the same as them having a points deduction.
So can I ask as well, just a question that I think a lot of people have had. Is there a kind of leniency towards how much you go over this FFP limit, or is it literally like let's say you're £100 or £1,000 over, is that like breached it? Is it that strict?
I think it is that strict. If we take a look at, if anybody reads the Everton case in depth, wouldn't recommend it unless you're struggling to sleep. There are no hard and fast rules, but Richard Masters, who's the chief executive of the Premier League, he said that in an ideal world, they say if you go over by £1, it's an automatic 6 points deduction. And then for every further £5 million you go above the limit, it's a further 1 point deduction. And the Premier League would prefer that points deductions are given, but actually the Premier League can't dictate that. It is assessed by an independent commission. The argument for points deductions is that if you've got a football club that's owned by a billionaire or a multi-billionaire or a sovereign wealth fund, if you say, well, we're very naughty, we're going to fine you 100 grand, they'll go, well, it's fine. Yeah, there it is. Just 100 grand, in which case next year we're going to make 3 times or 4 times as many of the losses because it's not a deterrent. It's not seen as a punishment. It's just seen as a cost of doing business, as we see in other industries. So there are no definitive rules as far as the Premier League is concerned. If you drop into the Championship's got a very, very set tariff. And we saw that in relation to Birmingham City being given a points deduction a couple of seasons ago. You'd have known at the time because Forest and Birmingham were both in the Championship at the time. So there is no definitive rule, and I think that's going to form part of Everton's defence. They've appealed against their 10-point deduction.
And so the final question I'll ask you, because as I said, I know you're incredibly busy. Do you think that if there was to be some sort of punishment for any team, would that come into place this season?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, one of the issues that was raised by the Everton case was that if you take a look at the 3 clubs that were relegated last season, Leicester City, Leeds and Southampton, if Everton had a 4-point deduction last season, they would have been relegated. And one of those clubs would have survived, and I can't remember which one. So those clubs feel aggrieved that the process is taking too long. Now, last season, you had until the 1st of March before you had to submit your accounts to the Premier League. They brought this forward to the 31st of December. They've effectively said, we're going to fast track any potential investigations with a view to being able to form a commission to levy charges against the club and have a judgment made before the end of the season. So that is the objective. That's the ambition of the Premier League. Whether they can put that into practice, we don't know.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for your time there. That was Kieran Maguire giving you a little bit more insight into FFP, the Premier League, and Nottingham Forest as well. We're hoping that can maybe resolve some of your nerves that you've got. But I think the only thing that you can really do from this point is wait until any further decisions are made, which, of course, is out of everyone's hands, really. But again, I'd like to thank you, Kieran, and good luck in recovering from that match that you watched yesterday. And all the best.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jay, and thanks very much for the invite. And all I can say as a away fan, I love going to Forest. It's a proper football ground. It's a proper atmosphere. I first went there with Brighton in '77 in the League Cup game, which we lost 3-1. It's a proper club you've got there.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate that. I feel all nice now. Thank you for that, Kieran, and take care. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Cheers now.
Cheers.